She's like a sickness in my brain, a vision standing by the window pane. She ripples through the blinds and leaves me in a daze. It's in the way her body moves me, the way she grabs me and intoxicates, until the signals in my mind forget to operate. Fragile skull, I take my pleasure from my alcohol. She'll never give you any time at all. She just comes and goes, you know, and she's got me living in a chemical.
Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel and thank you for joining me for another Coffee and Crime Time. The case that we're talking about today has been highly requested in the comments of other videos. And going through the case, I understand why. It's technically been solved, the person responsible has been brought to justice, but there's still a lot about it that doesn't make complete sense. There's still questions, there's still aspects of it to discuss, so hopefully we can go through everything that we know about the case and try to see if we can't figure it out together. But before we dive in, let's have a word from the sponsor of today's video, Magellan TV. So if you're like me, and I think a lot of you are like me, and you love documentaries the way that I do, you probably have already exhausted most of your documentary options on streaming platforms. Maybe you've even watched some of them twice. Cue the staircase. That's why you should try Magellan TV, a documentary streaming service founded by filmmakers. Magellan TV has more true crime documentaries than any other platform, and every week they add 15 to 20 hours of new content, so you will never run out of something to watch. Every week I always get excited to pop into Magellan TV's new releases category, and recently they've put a bunch of stuff in there that I got really pumped about and ended up enjoying quite a bit. But we don't have an hour to talk about all of it, so if I had to recommend one thing to those of you who have already been watching Magellan TV or who plan to check it out, it would be Scotland's Murder Mysteries, where experts expose the truth behind Scotland's most brutal murders, revealing themes of love, greed, and jealousy that motivated these crimes. There are 8 riveting episodes in this documentary series, and I was captivated by each one of them, but I would say my favorite was the Jesse King episode. I really love I love anything history, but I like historical true crime. I like seeing how things were different back then. If you think our justice system is broken now, go on back to the 1800s. You know what I mean? So the Jesse King episode was definitely my favorite. I don't want to give anything away, but it's pretty crazy. Magellan TV is completely ad-free, and it can be watched anytime, anywhere on your television, cell phone, tablet, or laptop. It's also compatible with smart TVs, Roku, Amazon Fire TV, Apple TV, Google Play, and iOS. And they don't just have true crime content. They have amazing history content, some of my favorite science, nature, and travel documentaries that will keep you entertained and educated for hours. With an annual membership of just $59.98 a year, you'll only pay $4.99 a month for 3,500 hours worth of amazing documentaries. And if you click the link in the description box, you can try Magellan TV out for yourself for 1 month free, no strings attached, no contracts to sign. You can cancel anytime you want to, but I really don't think that you're going to want to. Once you get in there and start seeing all they have and putting stuff in your queue, like to watch later, you're going to be like, all right, I need more than 1 month. It's so good. Thank you so much to Magellan TV for sponsoring today's video, and let's dive in. On the morning of Saturday, April 16th, 2022, 51-year-old Glenn Van Nostrand was finishing up a walk with his 2 pet Rhodesian Ridgebacks through Forest Hills Park in Queens, New York. So he's walking his 2 dogs, and he spotted a black wheeled bag. And this bag was laying half on the grass and half on the pavement. Now, Van Nostrand claims he saw the bag from about 100 yards away, but he doesn't have great vision in his left eye, so it was only when he got closer to the bag that he noticed there was a pool of blood oozing from the bottom of the bag onto the ground around it. At this point, the 2 dogs he was walking, they began to go crazy, and they pulled him closer to this mysterious and ominous object which seemed to be out of place on the bright tree-lined path that Glenn walked along on a regular basis. Glenn Van Nostrand decided to nudge the bag with the side of his leg, and he claimed it felt heavy due to the amount of blood that must have been inside of it. Initially, Glenn thought that maybe the bag contained a dog or some other large animal because according to Glenn, he's seen some, quote, crazy shit in and around Forest Park, including the severed head of a pig that he had encountered just a few weeks earlier. This part of the story I keep coming back to because I'm like, I need to know more about this pig head. Where did you find it? What were the circumstances? Unfortunately, I did look. There's no more information about the pig head, but it just seems crazy. Let me know if you live in Queens or New York City, if this is something that you commonly encounter. Anyways, Glenn Van Nostrand told the New York Times, quote, I decided to open the bag. I'm right-handed, so I used my right hand to pull the zipper down, and I just saw this pair of bare feet. Pale, bare feet. And I was like, oh my God, end quote. But even now, Glenn thought he might be dealing with some grotesque theater prop, claiming that the part of the body he could see, the feet, they didn't look very fleshy, and maybe they could have belonged to a mannequin. But as we know, they always think it's a mannequin, but it's never actually a mannequin. We talked about this in the Black Dahlia Elizabeth Short case, many other cases where I believe the Alphabet murders was another one where people have come across bodies and immediately thought this is a mannequin. And I've often wondered if this is like a protective mechanism of some kind, if it's the human brain trying to soften the blow to the terrifying reality of what the eyes are seeing. So as Glenn Van Nostrand unzipped the bag a bit further, he saw black, ankle-length skinny jeans, a belt, and the upper portion of a woman's waist. The bag contained the body of a woman who had been placed inside of that bag head first and who was curled into a fetal position. Now, Glenn Van Nostrand claimed that he poked 2 fingers into the body just to be sure. And when he realized that the body was cold to the touch, he called 911, saying, quote, it all hit me really emotionally. I could feel this unsettling feeling rising in my throat, and I felt quite choked. I honestly thought the body was a teenager because it seemed so small, end quote. Now, Glenn's brave because if I see a bag that has blood oozing out of it while I'm walking, I'm not going to approach the bag. I'm not going to unzip the bag. I'm not going to nudge it with my leg. And I am certainly not going to poke 1 or 2 or any fingers into the body that's in the bag, even if I think it's a mannequin, right? Because if it's a mannequin, where's the blood coming from? So I always am stunned that people are like this brave and this bold because I would not be. I would have stayed 100 yards away. I would have told my dogs, you all need to chill and relax, and I would have called the police at that point. But it's good, I guess, that Glenn gets more information because now he has something real to tell the police, something that makes them come quick and take this seriously instead of just saying, I see a suspicious bag. He can say, I see a suspicious bag, there's a puddle of blood, and I believe that there's a dead body inside of this bag. Now, when the police arrived, they discovered that the woman inside the bag did not have any form of identification on her person. Reportedly, it's not unusual for bodies to be found in this spot just off the Jackie Robinson Parkway. I guess it's like a very convenient drop-off place for dead bodies. But what was different in this case was that there was a trail of blood that led law enforcement directly to the home of their victim and to the scene of the crime. But the trail of blood ended a half a mile away in a very unlikely place for such a brutal murder to have happened. The trail of blood brought NYPD detectives to the gated residential neighborhood of Forest Hills, Queens, one of the earliest private developments in the city, which is known to have some of the most beautiful architecture in New York. According to nycgo.com, quote, Forest Hills' gently rolling rows of Tudor houses and tulip trees are secluded and relaxed. The area sometimes feels like a throwback, with old-school pizza parlors, sweets shops, conditioneries, and a train station that looks unchanged from when Teddy Roosevelt spoke there 100 years ago. Famous for Forest Hills Stadium, the venue the Beatles played in 1964, the neighborhood is partially bordered by Forest Hills Park, which holds a popular golf course and is renowned as the birthplace of the Ramones and Simon and Garfunkel, and as the childhood home of Peter Parker, aka Spider-Man, end quote. As we know, the Beatles, the Ramones, Simon and Garfunkel, real people. Peter Parker and Spider-Man, not a real person, but that's a story for another day. But for the true crime viewer, which I assume you guys are, Forest Hills Station Square is best known as the site of the 1977 murder of Christine Freund at the hands of the notorious serial killer David Berkowitz, the son of Sam. Forest Hills' 88,000 residents live mostly in beautiful homes that were built in the 1930s and 40s, and they send their children to public schools that are ranked far above the national average. It's well known that New York City in general has a great deal of crime. We hear about it in the news almost every day. As somebody who used to frequent New York City on a monthly basis, because I like Broadway and I like the history of New York, I've seen it firsthand. But this part of the city, it seemed to be almost separated and untouched from all of that. One resident on niche.com proudly proclaimed, quote, "Despite being 30 minutes from Manhattan by subway, our sleepy area has avoided the big city problems that have plagued other neighborhoods. Crime is very low, and our elementary school won the National Blue Ribbon Award last year. I love it here." End quote. Forest Hills is just not a place where murders happen on a regular basis, and it's certainly not a place where you would expect to find a woman's body stuffed into a duffel bag. But as police followed the trail of blood to the $2 million Tudor home located at 7224 Juno Street, they found out that it was that place now. The victim was 51-year-old Orsolya Gaal, originally from Hungary, where her mother and sister still lived, and Orsolya had resided with her family in Forest Hills for the past decade. She was known to be a caring mother to her two sons, 13-year-old Leo and 17-year-old Jamie, who, apparently Jamie is like some piano prodigy. By the way, I saw a video of him playing the piano. He's a beautiful piano player. And Orsolya's Facebook page was filled with happy and smiling family pictures of herself, her two sons, and her husband, Howard Klein. There's pictures of them vacationing together in Paris and Tokyo, celebrating holidays, dressing up for Halloween. And on December 30th, 2021, Orsolya had posted a picture of her family with the caption, quote, "Happy New Year to all of you, dear family and friends. Hoping 2022 will be a great one," end quote. Neighbors and friends described her as an animal lover who enjoyed being active, whether she was hiking or skiing, and Orsolya loved anything to do with the arts, especially ballet and the theater. Neighbor Theodora Greffis said, quote, "She was a lovely lady, always very attentive to her family, her kids, just an amazing person. I met her parents and sister when they visited. Gaal was kind to people, super friendly, and took care of her family and kids," end quote.
Neighbors shocked by the horrific murder.
Never expected anything like that to happen. She was a lovely lady, always very attentive to her family, her kids. Just an amazing person. Our lives will not be the same neither, because every time I would come out, I would hear her or the dog barking. She was a very happy woman, always smiling, always joking.
And loved life.
Yeah.
She loved life, really. Yeah.
Neighbors say Gaal was in the process of planning her son's bar mitzvah.
We were to have a chat about whatever's going on, and we talk about our kids.
I just, pray that, people can find peace and justice.
So it appeared that Orsolya was very well liked, loved by many, surrounded by friends, and she was the kind of woman who didn't really make enemies easily. So who could have done this to her? When police arrived at Orsolya's home, they found that the only person home was her 13-year-old son, Leo. Her husband, Howard Klein, who was the owner of a boutique finance firm called RK Equity, he was basically on the other side of the country with the couple's 17-year-old son, Jamie, reportedly checking out colleges for Jamie because Jamie's 17. He's getting ready to graduate from high school and start thinking about college. Now, reportedly, the police knocked on the door, and there's different reports of what happened. Some say that Leo came down. He looked like he'd been sleeping. He was confused. Some say the police entered the house when they didn't get any response, and they found Leo on the 3rd floor of the home in his room. But either way, the police asked Leo if he knew where his mother was, and Leo said he did not. At that point, something happened which I heavily and heartily disagree with. NYPD officers handcuffed the 13-year-old boy and hauled him into the police station for further questioning. Now, remember Glenn Van Nostrand, the man who found Orsolya's body? Well, he was waiting at the 110th precinct to give his statement when the police brought Leo in. And Glenn told the Sun that Leo was dragged around the station, handcuffed, wearing no shoes and what appeared to be his pajamas. Glenn Van Nostrand said, quote, his head was kind of down, like tilted forward a little. And I mean, he was brought right past me. It was about 1, 2, 3, and he was gone, wheeled around the corner of the train station and put in a room I couldn't see. End quote. Now, Leo was questioned and he was released later that evening. But the reason I think what they did to Leo was unconscionable is because this kid is 13. And while I understand having to view everyone being, potentially involved, he was the only one home, the trail of blood led to the home, I get it. There was also a very large chance that Leo had nothing to do with what happened to his mother. And I mean, that's what it turned out to be. He had nothing to do with what happened to his mother. He didn't even know that she was dead until the police basically arrested him. And in this case, what you're doing is you're further traumatizing a child who's just found out that his mother's been murdered. And she's been murdered in the most brutal way possible. And he's being told this and informed this in the most abrupt and, cruel way possible, right? A child, he's 13, he's still a child. Child's going to need to be comforted in those moments, not handcuffed, dragged into the police station to be interrogated without either of his parents present. They didn't even let him put shoes on. They didn't even let him get dressed. I think it's a little ridiculous. I think it's a little bit of overkill, and I'm really disappointed because my heart goes out to Leo, who has lost his mother. And on top of this, he finds out in the most horrendous way possible. They basically decided he was like a suspect from the get, and he was probably treated as a suspect at the police station, because I would think if it was kind of just some innocent questioning, they would have been like, yeah, kid, go on, put some socks on, put some shoes on. Do you want to put some real clothes on, or do you want to stay in your pajamas? I think that it would have been a little bit more kind, and there would have been a little more sympathy and empathy there. But it appears they just literally dragged him into the police station. So bad call, NYPD. Now, on that Saturday morning, Orsolya's husband and older son Jamie were traveling back to New York City from Oregon. And Howard, Orsolya's husband, he claims that he received a threatening text from his wife's phone saying, quote, your whole family is next. Your wife sent me to jail some years ago. I'm back. End quote. Now, Howard Klein, he hasn't made many public statements, so it's not totally clear of the timeline, but it appears he received this text in the hours after his wife was murdered, so the very early morning hours, because he told the New York Post that he'd found out about his wife's murder as he was getting ready to fly back to New York, and that he was grateful that Leo was safe, but now he felt that his whole entire family, they were in danger, and there was some madman out there that was going to come for them too, because that's what the text said. Police found blood on the 1st floor of the home, as well as more blood in the basement of this 3-story house. Orsolya had been stabbed 58 times in the torso, in the neck, in the arms, and defensive wounds were visible on her palms and the fingers of her hands. The viciousness of this attack immediately led law enforcement to believe that whoever had murdered Orsolya had been known to her, especially because there were no signs of forced entry. And initially it was believed that her killer had either been let into the home or they had used a spare key that was known to be hidden in a barbecue on the property. And we talk about this a lot in cases like this where there's literal overkill present. We actually just talked about this in one of our most recent videos, Alicia Jackson. We talked about it a little bit in the Ellen Greenberg case. When you see this many stab wounds, you're not talking about some stranger who's just there to rob you. You're talking about something that's personal. You're talking about someone being the murderer who has a lot of emotions, a lot of rage, a lot of anger, resentment, jealousy, what have you, built up inside of them, and they're taking it out during the murder. A senior NYPD supervisor said, quote, "We think the attack happens on the first floor. We think he then goes to the basement to figure out, how to clean up the mess and get rid of her." End quote. Now, the police needed to piece together a timeline of Orsolya's movements in the hours before her death to try and determine who could have done this to her and why. On the evening of Friday, April 15th, neighbor John Blankson saw Orsolya in the backyard of her home along with her dog, Teddy. She loved that dog. Teddy is in a bunch of pictures with Orsolya Gaal. It's very cute. He's a very cute dog. And a lot of the neighbors said, Orsolya was kind of known to have Teddy along with her. Anytime they saw her outside, this dog's trotting along next to her or in her arms. Now, John Blankson said, quote, "The sun came out. Friday was quite nice. We were outside. We didn't actually speak to her. We were just chilling outside, but she was outside with the dog." End quote. Now, neighbors told detectives that Orsolya had left her home to head into Manhattan around 6 p.m. that evening, where she was going to be seeing an opera at Lincoln Center with some female friends. She returned to the Forest Hills area at around 11 p.m., at which point she went to the Forest Hill Station House bar, where she stayed for roughly 45 minutes. She ordered a bite to eat. She ordered her usual drink, a Moscow Mule. Apparently, Orsolya was a regular at this establishment. She usually came in alone. She always ordered the same drink, and she was well known to the bar's manager, Gabe Veris, who said, quote, "She came in alone. She left alone. She had come back from a concert seeing her favorite composer. She was delighted at that. She was elated that she saw this composer live." End quote.
We're all trying to make sense of it at the same time. It's mind-boggling.
Gabriel Veris manages the Forest Hills Station House, where Gaal was a regular. She stopped by hours before she was killed and ordered her regular drink, a Moscow Mule, after seeing a show at Lincoln Center with friends.
She didn't seem frightened or scared or panicked, just enjoying her one drink before going home.
Now, in some earlier articles reporting on this crime, they say that Orsolya went to the bar and appeared to be waiting for somebody. And she waited for about 45 minutes. And when this person didn't arrive, she left on her own. But then in later reports, and when, Gabe talks to the press, he says, no, it doesn't seem like she's waiting for anybody. She usually comes in alone. This is like her typical routine. After this, Orsolya Gaal went home, where police believe her attacker arrived sometime between 12:20 a.m. and 12:30 a.m. And at 4:30 a.m., a person wheeling a duffel bag down the street was picked up on the doorbell camera of a 75th Avenue home.
Surveillance video shows a shadowy figure rolling a duffel bag in darkness. Police say inside that bag, the remains of 51-year-old Orsolya Gaal.
Police say the crime started here at the Juneau Street house of Gaal, a mother of two.
Her husband, Howard Klein, and eldest son were away Friday for a college visit, according to police. Her husband posting in a now-deleted tweet that the pair were traveling.
Law enforcement then say Gaal was stabbed at least 58 times, with additional injuries likely from self-defense. The suspect then put Gaal's remains in a duffel bag and allegedly rolled it half a mile away from her home to this area, where her remains were found.
Police reportedly also recovered a blood-covered knife in the home, which appeared to have come from the kitchen of Orsolya's house. And in the kitchen, they also found a note taped to the refrigerator, which said, quote, "Get a new handyman," end quote. On Monday, April 18th, detectives returned to the house in the early afternoon, and they removed a Mac computer as well as several bags of evidence. And then it came out in the media that Orsolya had been texting with several men the evening of her murder. I think it was 4 separate men. The New York Post reported that police were looking to speak to a handyman who had previously done work at the Juneau Street home of Orsolya and her family, but it was initially unclear as to whether this handyman was one of the men that Orsolya had been texting with that evening or if it was a separate sort of line of investigation. Residents of the quiet Forest Hills community began to express shock and fear that something so violent had happened in their own backyards.
Very nice family. Like, who would want to hurt her? She was a very, very nice lady.
Neighbors remain stunned.
I've lived here for 40 years, and we've never had anything like this happen.
Horror. Absolute horrifying. It's just, you don't expect something like that to happen here, and you don't expect that, you don't want it to happen anywhere, especially where you live. And it's just, and I think it's like the gruesome details that keep coming out just really struck a chord.
You keep reliving the sequence of events as how did this happen. So it's actually quite strange. The more it goes on, the more it's like the gravity of the situation just keeps making it worse.
It feels like something out of TV. It's just really, it's rough.
And then something kind of bizarre happened. They were looking for Orsolya. There's posters up asking for information about her, offering a reward. There's a constant police presence in this neighborhood. I'm not sure whether it was to make the residents feel safer or if they were waiting for the culprit to come back. But out of nowhere, on Wednesday, April 19th, NYPD detectives who were still present in the neighborhood, they were approached by a man who walked up to one of their squad cars and simply said, quote, "I hear you are looking for me." End quote. This man was quickly transported to the 12th precinct where he was questioned. He reportedly confessed to the murder of Orsolya Gaal and he was arrested. 44-year-old David Benola told police that he and Orsolya had been engaged in an on-again, off-again relationship for the past 2 years. He said the relationship had ended, but the two had reconnected at the beginning of April 2022 before Orsolya broke things off again, which led to Benola going to her house in the early morning hours of April 16th, 2022 to talk things out. Now, let's go back a bit and talk about who David Benola is, like what we know about him so far. He is reportedly a married father of two who entered the United States from Mexico illegally 21 years ago. He's like an aspiring filmmaker, I guess, according to his social media. And at the time of Orsolya Gaal's murder, he was estranged from his wife and children, who reportedly also lived in the Forest Hills area, while David Benola himself got an apartment in nearby Richmond Hill. Now, to be honest, in my opinion, just from what I know about this guy, he seems to be a bit unstable. Several media outlets have reported that David Benola appears to have had a YouTube channel where he had a lot of playlists, and these playlists centered around very specific genres and topics. So there's a lot of videos that he watched and shared and saved where there's, talk about New York City crime, news reports and things. And Benola also seemed interested in videos where tips were given to seduce women. And I think that some of you probably know what kind of videos I'm referring to here. They are fun, I guess, fun to watch and fun to make fun of because these men are just absolutely ridiculous. Now, I'm not a man hater as much as I've been accused of being so in my videos, and I think these people are just trolls because I think I'm pretty fair to both men and women, and on one hand I have people accusing me of being like anti-man, and then other people are accusing me of being anti-woman, and I just can't win. But really what I try to do is be fair in every situation. But these men who make these videos, I call it the fresh and fit phenomenon, where they just get up there and they're like, oh, men are the prize. Women need to be grateful to have the prize, and men can go out and cheat because they're the man, and the woman has to stay home and be loyal because she just has to be grateful that she has a high value man providing for her, and men are the warriors and they're the protectors, and women, that's the price they pay for being, protected and cared for by the men. There's a lot of channels, and I watch some of them, and I do think that, sometimes it's not all bad, but some of these videos are very uncomfortable. You literally have some of these men saying, like, this is how you attract all women, every woman, all the time. And basically their advice contains tips on how to invade a woman's space, how to not take no for an answer, how to play games, things like that. It's pretty funny. Actually, I was thinking of making like a vlog channel where I just make fun of these videos and make fun of these people. But anyways, according to The Sun, quote, there are thousands of videos carefully organized into multiple playlists, including over 750 videos of local news reports about violent crimes, including rapes, murders, and shootings, end quote. This channel also allegedly contained clips about the stabbing death of 18-year-old college student Tessa Majors from 2019, a news report about the death of the ex-fiancé of actor Drew Carey and sex therapist Amy Harwick was also shared on this channel. Now, the Tessa Majors murder did happen in New York City. I believe Amy Harwick was killed in California, and I do want to do a video on Amy Harwick because it's an interesting case. But these are the kinds of things that he's sharing. These are the kinds of things that he's saving to playlists. There's also a playlist titled Interesting, including a video that was called How an AK-47 Works. One playlist contained over 200 videos with themes dealing with sex and dating, including many videos on how to win back a woman who is no longer interested in you. Some of the videos included in this playlist included misogynistic winners such as attraction tips that will attract all women, how to be insanely irresistible, how to get a girlfriend even if she isn't interested in you at first, how to get your ex to think about you constantly, and so on and so forth. It has been reported that David Bonola was a regular at the Forest Hills Austin Street Starbucks coffee shop, where he did a fantastic job of creeping out the female employees who worked there and the female customers who shopped there, to the point where the employees had to call the police on more than one occasion. Former barista, 21-year-old Olivia Pikolensky, claimed that Bonola would always order the same thing, a dark roast coffee and a piece of lemon pound cake or banana nut loaf, before sitting down in the cafe facing the female employees that were working behind the counter so he could watch them. Pikolensky said, quote, he would come up to us and ask for coffee and tell us we looked pretty and make comments about how we looked. He was creepy. He stalked people. It was known, end quote. Bonola was also known to write love letters and compose songs for the female baristas, which he would then place in their tip jars, because yes, every barista wants a love song that you wrote in their tip jar. The audacity. On one occasion, Bonola wrote a love letter for one barista before writing her name on his headphones and then seating himself in the cafe facing her and watching her. Pikolensky said, quote, he even went as far as proposing to two of us, which is super unsettling because of how weird the interactions were, end quote. Apparently, David Bonola would ask the baristas personal questions, such as like when their birthdays were, where they lived, or where they attended school, information that Pikolensky believes a customer should never be asking an employee. She went on to say, quote, I am speechless that it was him after all the creepy incidents that happened and how unsettled he made everyone feel, especially the females I worked with, and even the customers in the lobby. It's crazy to think about, end quote. Now, like I said, it was reported that several employees from the Starbucks called the police on more than one occasion, but by the time officers arrived, Bonola had left. An NYPD spokesperson did confirm that there were harassment complaints on file about Bonola from that Starbucks location, but nothing that matched Pikolensky's claims. And can I just interject here? Maybe it's because the NYPD is notoriously bad at taking reports like this seriously. I mean, to some extent, I can't really blame them considering the level and amount of violent crime that happens in that city every single day. This probably seemed like small potatoes to them, like a waste of their time. I can see them like talking amongst themselves like, oh, he told you that you were pretty? How terrible. Ugh. And then writing some half-assed report, not including any of the details that were given to them by these women who clearly were made to feel unsafe by this customer on more than one occasion. But yeah, I also think that there is some aspect of trying to cover your own ass at this point. Like the spokesperson's like, yeah, there were claims, there were reports of harassment, but not to like this level. Who cares? A report of harassment's a report of harassment. Did you follow up on it? That's what I want to know. David Bonalla was working as a heating and air conditioning repairman. Like we said, he had done some work at Orsolya Gaal's house, and from the spring of 2020 on, he'd been commenting on Gaal's Facebook page several times. Orsolya had a picture of herself when she was in Guatemala in 2019, and under this picture, Bonalla wrote, quote, "Love those streets and architecture, that landscape and the giant volcano, and you," end quote, followed by a heart emoji. Under another post, Bonalla wrote, "Tu Murata, Enamorada," which roughly translates to "Your Look in Love," and the comment appears to be in reference to a 1999 song called Tu Murata by Luis Miguel. It's reported that police were pointed in Bonalla's direction by that note on Orsolya's refrigerator, reminding her to get a new handyman, as well as communication between the two that they had found in her cell phone. Now, the police began watching Bonalla while they're telling the public that they don't have any suspects, they don't have any persons of interest, they just want to talk to this handyman. But they're watching him at this point and keeping tabs on him and his home, including waiting for his trash to be picked up so they could recover it and go through it without needing a warrant, which they did on Tuesday, April 19th. Harry Mirage, a construction worker who was sitting in the tropical Jade Rhodey Express on Lincoln Avenue, he witnessed the police flagging the garbage truck down, and he said, quote, "It was the afternoon. The cops came and stopped the truck. They took some bags out of the truck and opened them up. They took a white bag from the truck and a pair of brown boots. The boots weren't in any bag. They put everything in big brown paper bags and left," end quote. Now, I will give credit where credit is due. The NYPD did a very good job of figuring out who David Bonalla was and then, basically being on him like white on rice. I appreciate that, so thank you. The boots that were recovered from that garbage truck, they belonged to David Bonalla, and they had blood all over them. Police also recovered bloody bandages in the garbage. And it was discovered that after Orsolya Gaal had been murdered, David Bonalla went to a local hospital to have wounds on his hands treated. He was also seen on a surveillance camera walking down 114th Street near his Richmond apartment on 6:05 a.m. Saturday morning with one of his hands covered in makeshift bandages. CBS News has also now reported that ICE has lodged a detainer against Bonalla since his arrest with the Queen's central booking, and legal expert Stuart Slotnick told CBS 2's Ollie Bowman, quote, "That means that he's not here with permission and he's subject to deportation," end quote. Now, initially, we had very vague reporting about what David Bonalla told the NYPD. They claimed that after he approached them and he was taken to the police station, he made a very matter-of-fact confession. He then devoured a bagel and cream cheese as his statement was being processed, and he later repeated his confession on videotape for the prosecution. Here is David Bonalla telling a reporter to fuck off as he's being arrested.
David, why'd you do it? Over here, David. David, what happened? Okay, Paso, David, why'd you do it? Okay, David. What happened, David?
The audacity, right? Like, you murdered somebody, you confessed to it, you're being arrested. I know the press is annoying, but you're a murderer. You don't have the right to be annoyed by the press. And usually, these suspects do not respond back to the media as they're being arrested and taken away. So to me, it's a sign that he doesn't have a ton of control over his behavior, over his reactions. And maybe he has a little bit of a temper and he may react and do things without thinking it through. Okay, so what we heard is that David went to the house to talk to Orsolya about their relationship. She let him into the house, but the two of them quickly began arguing, at which point Orsolya led David down to the basement so that they would not wake up her 13-year-old son Leo, who was sleeping upstairs. In the basement, David claims that the argument escalated, at which point he casually described to the police how he flew into a fit of rage, grabbed a knife, slit Orsolya's throat, and then stabbed her repeatedly across the left side of her body. He then took her own son's hockey bag and stuffed her body into it, waiting until 4:30 a.m. before he wheeled the bag towards Forest Park, allegedly because he didn't want her son to find her body in the house. Now, here are two things that occurred to me as I was listening to this series of events initially. First of all, it seems that this may have been a bit more premeditated than David was making it seem. Like, he wants us to think that this happened in like a moment of passion. You know, he wants us to think that after they went into the basement, things got out of control, emotions took hold, he killed her in a fit of rage. But the knife that he used to take her life was reportedly from the kitchen of the home, which I assume is not located in the basement. That means at some point, before Orsolya led David down to the basement, he had managed to grab a knife from the kitchen. Like, what did he think was happening in the basement? Were they going to have a charcuterie board? Was he going to be prepared so he could slice up some pepper jack and some salami? Additionally, it seems as if David remained in the house for hours after he killed her and before he left to dispose of her body, which is terrifying, knowing that her young son was sound asleep upstairs while this was going on. And Leo, he could have easily become another victim if he had woken up or wandered downstairs for a glass of water, because I guarantee you, had Leo seen David Bonalla in that house, Bonalla would not have left him alive to tell the tale. But maybe the knife question is going to be answered in a minute because new information has sort of come to light. As I was putting this video together, more information came out about what David Bonalla told the police about that night. Bonalla allegedly claims that he went to Gaal's house that night because he believed she had given him HIV at some point during their 2-year affair. And he told NYPD detectives on April 20th, quote, "She gave me HIV, she lied to me, she used me, she cheated on me, she told me that she loved me, she couldn't be with one person," end quote. Now, according to court documents, Bonalla also claimed that Orsolya had taken a phone call from another man and she had plans to see this other man, and this made him angry and he just could not accept it. Those are his words, "I just could not accept it." Now, the court documents do not specify when this call came in or even if there's evidence of such a call, but in another news article, it was sort of clarified that David Bonalla had been with Orsolya at some point in the month of April, and it was at that time that she'd taken another call and, said she was going to meet up with this other guy. Allegedly, she told him, like, "I can't just be with one person." And then he claims later he saw her with another man, and that's when he just couldn't take it anymore. He couldn't cope with this. Bonalla claims that he knocked on the door of Orsolya Gaal's home, and when she answered the door, she asked him why he was there, at which point he responded that he just wanted her to tell him the truth about why she had given him HIV, and Orsolya responded that she did not have HIV. Bonalla continued to explain that at this point, it was Orsolya who grabbed the knife and told him to leave her house and that things between them were over. And he said that at this point, he, quote, "grabbed the knife and cut her from the neck. She kept fighting and we fall. She was moving, trying to grab me, so I stabbed her in the neck to get her to stop attacking me," end quote. In another article, he says she was screaming at him at this point. She was screaming like, "I hate you, I hate you." And after Orsolya was dead, Bonalla said he cleaned the house with towels, he brought her body to the place it was found, and then he texted her husband from her phone saying, quote, "In the past, she had told me that she'd sent a man to jail, so I sent a message to her husband pretending to be that guy because I was scared. I took her laptop because she had sex videos on the laptop. I threw her laptop in the Hudson River where I used to visit her," end quote. Now, with this being a new development, we don't have confirmation of the HIV status of either Bonalla or Orsolya Gaal, but I find it hard to believe that this was the real motive. In fact, I find everything that David Bonalla says about this interaction a bit hard to believe, and I'll tell you why. First of all, it doesn't make sense. The whole knife thing just doesn't make sense. Did she answer the door holding the knife? Did she, at some point when he wouldn't leave her house, run to the kitchen and grab the knife and then run back while he was still standing outside? Did he push her into the house and then she went to get the knife? What you have to understand is there was some blood found on the first floor, but it seemed like the majority of the blood was found in the basement, making the first version of the story that we heard, I think, a little bit more accurate. She let him in. They were talking. It started getting loud. She was like, "Let's go downstairs so we don't wake Leo up." And then in the basement, he stabbed her because before they went downstairs, he probably already grabbed the knife knowing he was going to do this. I think he went to the house that night to kill her. I don't think he went to talk it out. I think he realized she was done and he was like, "I'm going to kill her." I don't think that there was this whole HIV thing. I think that it's either a lie which can easily be disproven when we find out that either he or she did not have HIV, or he's trying to go for an insanity plea, honestly, at this point, because he may be able to argue that, like, oh, I thought I had HIV, I was paranoid, like, that drove me mad, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know. I just find it all hard to believe that the HIV thing was the real motive. And I do doubt that we'll find out that Orsolya Gaal was HIV positive, although I have been wrong before. Stranger things have happened. I just don't know why, but for some reason, it doesn't fit with everything. And then he said that they were fighting on the first floor of the house, and that was where he started stabbing her, and she was screaming like, I hate you, I hate you. But yet, Leo doesn't wake up at any point during this struggle. He doesn't hear anything. That's a little difficult to believe. I do think that the first version was probably accurate, where as soon as they started raising their voices, Orsolya was like, let's go downstairs so we don't wake Leo up. And that's where the attack happened, because that's where the majority of the blood was found. But I guess we will see when this goes to trial, because David Bonalla has pleaded not guilty, even though he confessed twice. Orsolya Gaal is going to be cremated, and her 2 sons and husband are preparing to fly to Hungary to be with her parents and mourn as a family. David Bonalla was arrested. He was charged with 2nd-degree murder, 1st-degree criminal tampering, and 4th-degree criminal possession of a weapon. And like I said, he's pleaded not guilty, even though he confessed twice. Queens District Attorney Melinda Katz said, quote, the heinous murder left 2 teenagers without a mother and terrified an entire community. The defendant has now been indicted and arraigned on very serious charges and faces a lengthy prison sentence if convicted, end quote. And if convicted, Bonalla faces a sentence of 25 years to life. And I guess I want to say that, nothing surprises me anymore when it comes to what violent criminals are capable of. We've seen it all. We've seen things happen in real life that we previously thought were only possible in movies or on TV, in fiction. But what continues to astound me is the public victim shaming that happens when a murder victim turns out to be less than perfect. So in these videos, sometimes in the comment section, I'll see people say things like, oh, it's always the same. This person was so great, had no enemies. Their smile lit up a room, et cetera, et cetera. That's not very real. That's not very relatable. And I agree, right? Because none of us is perfect. None of us is like an angel floating around on earth, just shooting rainbows out of every orifice and just raining golden gumdrops on everybody that we come into contact with. If you went into anyone's electronics, cell phones, computers, etc., you'd find some stuff that maybe didn't shine the best light on them. And yet, we still have a public response of blaming the victim for becoming a victim. Joseph Giacalone, a retired NYP detective and current professor at John Jay College in Brooklyn, has been openly critical of what he feels has been the shaming of Orsolya Gaal in the media and the public response. He feels that Gaal may have felt uneasy or even scared when she broke off her relationship with David Bonalla, and she may not have felt comfortable going to the police for help because obviously she didn't want her husband and her family to find out what was going on. Giacalone said, quote, she might have felt stuck in a catch-22. What I read about a lot is victim blaming. She got involved in an extramarital affair. Everything we do in life comes with consequences, but murder should never be the answer or the consequence, end quote. Well said, and I agree completely. First of all, we don't know about the private lives of Orsolya and her family, and we shouldn't know because they're the private lives of Orsolya and her family. It's none of our business. Just because she was murdered does not entitle us to know everything about her private lives and her family dynamic. She could have had an open marriage. She could have had an arrangement or an agreement with her husband where one or both of them were allowed to have relationships outside of the marriage. An entanglement, if you will. But even if she didn't, why does it matter? Blaming someone for being murdered due to an affair is the same thing as blaming a woman for getting murdered while in an abusive relationship. This happened before. He'd hurt her before. He'd hit her before. She'd called the police before, but she still stayed. So therefore, this is her fault. We wouldn't say that. Well, some people might, but a normal human person with a heart and a soul wouldn't say that. So why would we even mention that Orsolya was having an affair? Therefore, this is somehow her fault. It comes down to a matter of entitlement. No one is entitled to having you in their life. No one is entitled to having you be loyal to them in a marriage or in an affair. We would prefer that. That's like probably a lot of people would consider the right thing to do, but it's not like the law. You don't break any laws when you cheat on your husband or wife. No one is entitled to you feeling the same way about them every day of your life for the rest of your life. You can fall in love with someone and be in love with them for 15 years, and then you both change and you grow apart. And the other person has a right to feel hurt. The other person has a right to feel betrayed, but they do not have the right to say that they are entitled for you to continue loving them in the same way you did. They don't have the right to say that they are entitled for you to remain with them and them alone because you were that way for 10 years or 15 years. People like David Bonalla kill people like Orsolya Gaal because they feel entitled to them, to their love, to their time, to their commitment. It is that bullshit, if I can't have her, no one else will mentality that has caused countless women and men, honestly, to lose their lives because someone else felt that they were entitled to their love, their loyalty, their commitment. Dr. Rachel Bruce puts this very simply, saying, quote, "That would be the old-fashioned way of thinking about it. She pushed him to do it. We know that's not true, but that's how an abuser works. They're going to be abusive to their partners regardless of their partner's behavior. That's what they do. They try to make the victim feel responsible, like they are somehow to blame. If I hadn't done X, Y, or Z, he wouldn't have hit me. There is nothing that anyone does that makes someone stab them. Everyone is responsible for their own behavior. There's never anything a victim can do where they deserve to get hit or hurt." End quote. I'd like to point out that we don't have all the facts. We have the news reports and the police saying that these people were having a relationship of some kind, that Orsolya and David were having a relationship of some kind for 2 years. But we don't know what that relationship entailed. It could have been just flirty texting. It could have been just, stolen glances. Maybe they were never even intimate. We don't know. We also don't know how David was in that relationship. He could have done something along the way that scared Orsolya. He could have become controlling. I think that's very likely. He seems to be the type who would love bomb someone. And if Orsolya was having problems in her marriage, if she had a very busy husband who was traveling a lot for work or who was wrapped up in his job because he owns his own firm, whatever, she may have been attracted to that love bombing. She has a guy over here who's like, "Oh, you're so beautiful. Love is in your eyes. I love everything about you." And she's over here like, "Wow, this feels really good." Everybody falls victim to that. Everybody does, right? So we have somebody who's love bombing, and then as soon as he draws her in, he becomes controlling. "Well, I don't want you to see other men. When are you going to leave your husband? We're going to have a great life together. I can't take it anymore. I need to have you just to myself." And it gets a little scary and it gets a little intense. But at this point, what's she going to do? Call the police? No, because now she's done something, that stepped outside of her marriage. She knows it. And she doesn't want this, bad judgment or a moment of bad judgment to ruin her entire life and devastate her family. So she keeps quiet, she breaks it off, and she hopes that he just goes away, but he doesn't go away. That's not her fault. He felt entitled to her. And I will admit, David Bonalla, whatever happened, has every right to feel hurt, betrayed, disappointed. Go cry it out, eat a pint of ice cream, and watch Bridget Jones's Diary like the rest of us do. He was not entitled to have her, and he had no right to go and take her life because he could not have her. It's very easy for people safe in their own homes and anonymous behind their computer keyboards to make these blunt, ignorant statements based on hindsight, like these comments here. Lori Dean says, quote, "Living an upper middle class life, but having an affair with a handyman from Craigslist who's been to prison and has nothing to lose. Oh yeah, giving him a key and easy access to your family home was a bright idea. How did he know the husband wasn't home? Bad decisions all around." End quote. With all due respect, Lori, fuck you. First of all, the LAPD have claimed that David Bonalla did not have a prior criminal history. So get your facts straight. Second of all, even if he did, how was Orsolya supposed to have known about it? Do you know the criminal history of every guy or gal you go out on a date with? Do you even know the criminal history of every person you've ever been in a long-term relationship with? Of course not. Most of us are not doing background checks on people before we start dating them. Most of us aren't. I think we all should. I will say that. but most of us are not. And again, Lori Dean, it was never reported for sure that Orsolya had given David Bonalla a key. There was evidence that there was a key hidden on the property that he may have known about due to his being at the home for handyman work, but they didn't ever claim that this was how David entered the home. The police always said he was either let in or he used the key. And it wasn't that she had given him the key. It was he knew where it was on the property, Lori Dean. So why don't you actually do your homework before making these pretentious and entitled comments about a woman who's not around to defend herself? Bad decisions all around, Lori, to even feel pretentious enough to write a comment like this when a woman is dead and 2 boys have lost their mother. And we got this comment from Stephen Geraci saying, quote, "I hate to blame the victim." Oh, but you're going to, Stephen, aren't you? You're going to. It's kind of like what I just did there with Lori's comment when I said, with all due respect, and then proceeded to say something disrespectful. Yeah, Stephen goes on to say, quote, "But what the hell was she doing having an affair with this guy? She not only cheated on her husband, but her kids as well. Not in any way implying that she deserved this. But if you want to play in the gutter, you're bound to get sewer water thrown on you," end quote. Okay. Wonder if Stephen Geraci has been a completely loyal and devoted man to every woman he's ever dated. I would love to know. Stones, glass houses, all that jazz. You never flirted, Steve? You never sent an illicit text? You never, exchanged glances with a woman on the subway? When you were in college, you didn't tell your girlfriend you were going out to hang out with your buddies, but meet a girl at the bar? Like, come on. And then we have this gem from Molecular. Quote, "She traded her life for this garbage. This is embarrassing, humiliating, and sad at the same time. Hopefully the husband and 2 sons can leave this crap behind and move on with their life," end quote. You hope that her 2 sons can leave this crap behind? When you say this crap, do you mean the brutal murder of their mother, who in no way deserved to die for anything that she did? You hope they can just leave that behind? Because as soon as you found out she had an affair, you decided her life wasn't worth remembering or mourning? Just crap to be left behind? And Orsolya didn't trade her life for anything. She didn't ask to be murdered. She didn't expect to be murdered. And she didn't choose this. She didn't look at David Bonalla and say, well, yes, he's definitely worth my life. I think carrying on with David Bonalla is certainly worth not seeing my children graduate from high school, not being able to see them attend college or get married. He's totally worth never holding my grandchildren in my arms. And if you think I'm going hard on these people, just think back to a time not so long ago when people just like this would have been looking at the victim of a rape, looking at the clothes she decided to put on before she went out the night of her rape. People like this would have said, well, what did she expect? Wearing a skirt that short or showing that much cleavage. She was asking for it. It's a slippery slope when you as a human being feel that you can look at a victim, the life that they lived and the decisions that they made, and justify what happened to them because of it. A slippery slope that I do not condone, I do not agree with, and I don't want to be a part of it. The only person responsible for what happened here is David Bonalla, who felt that a woman was his, and when she said, no, I'm not yours, I belong to myself, and I'm making a decision to no longer have you in my life, he snapped. His entitlement and his ego could not handle the fact that she was an entire-ass human person with her own thoughts, her own emotions, and her own ability to make decisions, and he had to snuff her out, because he just could not live in a world where he was not desirable to her and where all his YouTube videos of how to get your ex back, even if she no longer wants you, weren't working. And I will say, because I know there's going to be people in the comments like, oh, it's wrong to cheat on your husband. Of course, I wouldn't do it. But I also don't think that's any of our business. Orsolya, being unfaithful in her marriage, that's something that needs to be handled between herself and her husband. That's something that her husband now has to come to terms with, and something he has to decide whether he can forgive her for or not. That's none of our business. What we're talking about here is her brutal murder. In my opinion, Orsolya is not any less innocent than a person who walks outside of her house and gets randomly killed for no reason at all, because there is never a real or true reason that somebody's life should be taken by someone else. Never. And if you're out there in the world putting out this kind of narrative that she somehow asked for this, or, she's somehow to blame for this, you are part of the problem. And you will allow these criminals to continue to think that what they're doing is validated and justified in some way. So no victim blaming in my comment section if you can possibly help it. Now, of course, we can always talk about how people's decisions led to what happened to them. Obviously, people make bad decisions all the time that put them in bad situations. My bad decision could be walking down a dark alleyway in the middle of the night without someone with me. My bad decision could be, going to the parking lot and not seeing if somebody could walk me to the car at night and getting attacked. There's a plethora of bad decisions that people can do, and some are, on a higher scale than others. But I still don't believe that any of those people deserve for anything bad to happen to them, although that is sometimes what happens. And what we need to do as human beings, and especially women, is try to mitigate these risks. So yes, you should be very careful about who you interact with. You should be very careful about who you trust, who you let into your home. But once again, it's easy for us to say that in hindsight. So I see where both things are true, but there's no universe that exists where I would be like, well, play in the gutter, get sewer water thrown on you. It's just so tacky, so tasteless, so insensitive. And I hope society's going in a better direction than that. Thank you so much for being here. Let me know what you think about this case in the comments. I'm sending all of my thoughts out to Orsolya's family, especially her sons, who now have to face a life without a mother who, by all accounts, loved them more than the air she breathed. What she chose to do in her personal life and her own personal time did not reflect on the love that she had for her sons in any way, shape, or form. So I'm sending my thoughts out to them. I hope that they do eventually find peace. Thank you so much for being here. Stay kind, stay beautiful, and stay safe. I'm actually working on a deep dive that I'm very, very excited about. That should be coming next week, and I will see you very soon. Bye.
Don't break now, and the bottle's going straight down, and that river runs deep, the mountains get steep, and the voices getting too loud. All these feelings I've buried, it's looking like a cemetery. They're coming back from the grave, calling out my name, better say a Hail Mary. Well, you don't know how deep it goes until it's getting you slowly. So you got to let it go. I got blood.